welcome to Property Quorum.
Well, 10 o'clock today.
Yeah, well, no, but I'm here back today.
Well, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another Property Quorum. Joined by some of the stalwarts of the channel, of course. Chris Gilton of the Root Home, Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, and it should be pointed out that we should be joined by one extra. Let's hope he makes it when he does. Rowan of the Property Pen. But until then, let's talk about what today's topic is. Who needs their guidance anyway? Apparently, we can work it out. Hamish, would you care to explain what you mean? Hamish.
The Property Pen is joining us.
Fabulous.
Otherwise known as Rowan the Poem. Rowan is one of our irregular guests, is probably a way of looking at it. And more irregular today because I think we're in the caravan studio today still, are we, Rowan?
We are. I've tried to blurred it out a little bit today, so just to, yeah.
So we're speaking today, it's really the aftermath. We didn't have an opportunity last week to actually have a second opinion, or a third opinion, or even a fourth opinion.
I think more like a right to reply, wasn't it?
Yes, we didn't have a right to reply. But
yeah.
In fairness, Rowan, with his experience as an estate agent, would know how it would feel after a bit of advice that had been given by British standards was all of a sudden the rug was pulled, and no longer do estate agents have, if you like, a particular piece of guidance. I would imagine the professionals will still go about it the right way, but what the discussion is about. Can we find a way? Can we get a solution without regulation creeping in there and making a mess of it?
All right. Well, let's get Rowan straight under the wheels. Rowan, what's your opinion?
I think it's going to depend on whether there is going to be guidelines that are set down by the through the DMCC via the CMA in a similar way as was set down by parts A, B, and C, which was obviously all part of consumer protection regulations. So I think the difference is, it's essentially, I think estate agents have got to carry on doing the same thing as they were before. The difference is that before we had something that we could specifically follow, estate agents could specifically follow, that would keep you on the straight and narrow, and if you didn't do that, then you're in trouble because it could be proven that you didn't do something that we've told you need to do. Now it feels a little bit more abstract. I think in theory, if it's been in statute once, nobody can really assume that anything that they said was sensible to be telling a buyer previously isn't going to still be sensible today. And we still have the same obligations to be imparting basically material information to buyers in order to help them make the decision that they want to make in whether to buy a house or not. So the principle of the law to me is still the same. It's just there's not this guidelines written down. I don't know though whether there's going to be some guidelines that come out and appear on a website somewhere as they were on the National Training Standards website previously.
Juliet, could you explain to me, being a bear of little brain, exactly what is meant by this? And you're on mute, by the way.
So my understanding of this, I mean, obviously this is on sort of the estate agent territory, but the guidelines that are coming out are meant to help estate agents stay on track and not necessarily, lead people down a garden path or do things that are unregulated or, just do things that aren't right, but then there's a bit of question between the consumer and the estate agent thereafter. So that's my understanding of it. Whether or not there is a level of accountability that's required, that I don't know. Who it's being drafted by, whether it's people who actually understand the system. Again, it's questionable. But I'd like to see it and then be able to comment on it. At the moment, all I know is that there are a new set of guidelines to which, estate agents need to adhere to.
Do you think, as Rowan suggests, that the professions like yourself will continue on regardless using the old standard, which appears to be a tighter standard anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our own regulations anyway. So as far as we're concerned, irrespective of what regulation there is always the SRA's handbook and your sort of requirements to comply with their objectives. So that's always for us as solicitors, whether you're in conveyancing or otherwise, that is always your measuring stick.
Right. Wow. Okay. Chris, just before anybody gets any mystery on, does this actually affect the end user like yourself, the person at the sharp end of the stick at all?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, like I was saying last week, I was still banging the drum about how much of a challenge it is for me as a buyer and our clients waiting for all sorts of key bits of information that, in my view, the vendor should have pulled together at the point that they want to list their property. Weirdly, after literally the following day after our discussion last week, it was last Friday, I met with a couple of chaps, Nigel and Bharat from chimney.com, and they are one of 5 software developers and data aggregators who are working with central government on exactly what we were talking about last week, pulling together not just these standards, but effectively a digital wallet for a house. So everything to do with the property, including all the material information that our solicitors would want to enable them to have a pack at the push of a button. So instantly having that data rather than having to wait for quite some time. And I think that while these 5 different organizations that have been dragged in by central government to actually hash out sort of data standards between themselves and the central government, obviously government being as big as it is, it could be a little bit of time before any sort of consolidation of these standards comes into play, but it may come into play with the latest bill. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there might be a regulations amendment to this at some point that benefits the whole of our industry, because it is lamentable that we have to wait for such a long period of time for what, in my view, is basic information. And I appreciate that there's a huge amount of information to aggregate and pull together, and that can be very much overwhelming for vendors, and certainly for estate agents that aren't anywhere near as clued up as Rowan.
Chris. Yeah, it just appears to me that it's the right information that's required rather than all the information about everything. Rowan, is there a particular drag stopping this from coming together? Or, I mean, I thought the general will was there to achieve this.
I think the question mark is whether. So basically, we've been governed by Act since like 1979 or something, right? From the Estate Agents Act, it started to regulate this industry. Estate agents are very big-headed, and we think the whole world revolves around us. So basically, what happened is at some point the government said, well, why have we got these separate bits of legislation trying to control what estate agents do? There's bits of legislation that encompass the general marketplace, right? The general consumer protection. So we should just be lumping estate agents in with them, because it's about protecting the consumer, it's about protecting the end user. So the consumer protection from unfair trading regulations is what then replaced some of the stuff that estate agents were doing. And my understanding is it's basically the onus of the estate agent to comply with consumer protection from unfair trading regulations is just changing to being an onus to comply under Digital Markets and Competition and Consumers Act, which I haven't studied, so I need to understand what the layout of this new regulation, this new legislation is. It got its royal assent last year, right? But I think it was going to be rolled out in April, so this is all very new. But does that Digital Markets Act just absorb the Consumer Protection Act? Is there anything that's really changed overall about how consumers as an end user get protected? Because I think that's what it comes down to, and what Chris is saying. Actually, I had a question for Chris. Then you talk about Chimney and these other 4 groups that are working with central government to put this together. Is it going to include searches in advance in the same way as they were provided in HIPS? Because one of the things I can't work out is why anything that would come up in a local search, for example, or a land search, or a environmental search. Why isn't that material? It seems to me that is more material than a lot of the stuff that was provided in parts A, B, and C. So should that not be part of this the advanced work that estate agents do and provide? And are these guys talking about rolling that in and then working with people like Hamish to provide that from the outset rather than at the point of a sale?
Well, let's have Chris, and then let's have Hamish as a reaction to that.
I think so. I think they are targeting what used to be the old HIPS packs as a part of their offering, and their offering is much wider than just what I would expect in terms of the property information forms, the searches, and everything else that we'd expect to be handed over to our conveyancing team. They were going down to the specifications of the house. They were talking about the floor plans of the house. They're having all the Internet of Things, everything that's enabled in that property, everything that's digital, what the hob is, all the information on the fridges and the cookers and everything else, and all the installation guides. A full and comprehensive list of everything to do with that house. So yeah, it seemed to be quite wide and quite encompassing.
Hamish, what's your reaction to that? Apparently, everything will be there.
Well, what was sort of quite interesting, I must actually delve into it, and it may have been almost the very first meeting that we had, podcast that we brought Rowan into, and we were speaking about the time about that new TA6 form, the version number 5. And I remember at the time Rowan sort of saying, well, whatever it suggests, we can get that information together. It matters not what that information is. Since that time, I've actually sort of been working with several different people. It was quite interesting. Nigel Wally got in touch with me the other day there. I've been working on a system which encompasses, whether you actually call it a passport type system or whether you call it a bucket, you can stuff anything in a bucket you like. And I've been working on that for over 9 months now. That actually contains absolutely everything you would require.
I have to say, passport sounds a lot sexier, but okay, carry on.
Well, yeah, but it's the beauty of it is what you want to be able to do is put anything in there. It doesn't need the whole thing. Doesn't need to be predetermined, because depending on why you want to buy the property, it's sort of verging on another conversation I was having yesterday with somebody who we're actually sort of working with to actually orchestrate this sort of whole thing. And what we need to do is to get the right information for the right people, because Juliet will know. And previously what would happen when Juliet was working through it, she would call up the searches anyway. The beauty of the Homing Information Pack, the local authority searches were there. Now we've got a method whereby into that passport, and I don't like to call it passport because that seems to be a term now that is sort of being used, and I don't know whether they've actually sort of put some kind of ownership upon the term passport, but whatever it is, the principal information that people are requiring, if it's there and the right information is there, everybody's happy about it. Now, I think we can actually discuss between us, because the conversation I was having yesterday was a darn sight more than would previously have been sort of suggested as going in there. But the beauty of it is you can put in whatever you like. So if we, through discussion, and we speak to the likes of Chris and say, look, Chris, what information do you need? We speak with Juliet and say, what information do you need? Then we speak to the people that Rowan works for as the property pen now, because he's keeping his eye on how things are going and how to support estate agents. If we have that conversation between us, we can get all of that right detail, rather than somebody that's just wanting to sell data. We want to get everything together. And I think that's what's important. And discussions are going on. And I think, to be perfectly honest, we're so close to doing it, it gives far better opportunity than waiting for the government to come out with any sort of conclusions about it.
Chris, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I agree. To be quite honest with you, normally when the government gets involved, it F's things up, and it should just back out of it. Normally the free market is quite adequate at resolving its own issues, and I do think that government regulation is problematic at best. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. It'd probably be worth connecting Hamish with the guys at Jimmy, because it sounds like they've got some great collaboration potential right there.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, it seems to me that Rowan, that the free market will find its way, as Chris said. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I mean, estate agents will learn pretty quickly that they're still obliged to do the right thing, basically, and to provide information. I think the thing is, we feel like we're missing this act. That's not the act, the guidelines that have been taken away. But actually, material information as such, because it was so prescribed, it was you could. Yeah, so let's, for example, say in material information, you would disclose that there's a farm half a mile away. Right? It'd be there. It'd be shown on the map, on the title. So you've done your job by providing the information that shows there's a farm there. But if you know, as an estate agent, that a couple of days a week that farm absolutely stinks because that's when they sweep all the guts out from all the chickens that they've just slaughtered, and it really ponds. That's actually the information that a buyer needs to know. So they can look on this bit of paper and the estate agent's done the right thing, but what they haven't done, and I think this is where it's come under the consumers at the DMCC, what they really should be doing is going, look, you really should know, however beautiful this house is, just a couple of days a week, there's going to be a little bit of a hum in the air because this is what goes on at that farm that's half a mile away. And they can make an informed choice on it. So it's that bit of the process that matters. And that bit wasn't being, there was nothing in the guidelines of material information parts A, B, and C that really pushed people to have to provide that information, because the information was there in a prescribed way, but not necessarily in the spirit of what this Consumer Act is meant to be protecting people from.
Hamish, would you care to take us home, please?
Right. I mean, the interesting thing, and we haven't mentioned this within the conversation yet, the buyer does need to be aware of what the buyer. Unfortunately, if we pick on Rowan's example, if the buyer trips along, looks at this wondrous property, if he picks a day where the chicken remnants haven't actually been thrown out, everything looks hunky-dory. But it is a matter of trying. The trouble is that puts, and Rowan knows this full well from the work that he was doing as an estate agent. If you're not aware of it yourself, if you go around to look at that property that you're about to put on the market, if you go on there on the wrong day, and you would not know about it unless the buyer revealed such a matter to you. So it is a combination. It's a matter of working together to actually see what there is. And it's a matter, I think we can just sort of say to the person who's putting the property on the market, hey, is there anything we should pass on? Okay, we've got the positive, is there a downside? Could you be actually held responsible for not revealing this information if all of a sudden that solar farm appears, or whatever it sort of happens to be? So from that particular sort of perspective, it's a matter of cooperation. But I do believe, as Chris has suggested, as Rowan, I think between us all, we can actually resolve the issue. And it's just a matter of making sure that the seller is aware of what he should be passing on to. And it's a matter of education. I think there's much more positive than there is negative at the moment, because we're part way down that. And as Chris has said, and it's not just Chimney, there's various other people that are actually working on precisely that particular type of information. As I said, I've been working on it for a while, just to actually sort of see what. And as soon as somebody tells me what information they want, you can plonk it in there, in the bucket, in the passport, wherever the heck you want it. As long as everybody who's involved has access to it, jobs are good.
Well, thank you for that. I feel much uplifted. In the words of the Beatles, we can work it out. Thank you so much, Rowan Waller of the Property Pen, Chris Gilson of Root Home, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, and latterly, Juliet Babulel of Gunner Cook, who unfortunately, due to weather conditions, can't actually connect to us right now, but was here right at the beginning. And to all of you out there, I guess this is a time for positivity, something I was not expecting today on Property Quorum. But all of you, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye now.
Cheers.